Tonight, I thought we would talk about the effect of the fans not being at Rugby Park and how it sort of impacts the game from our point of view. Obviously, being here and being present, it's no different for us from what it is usually like in the past couple of seasons. But for the fans, watching at home, it's obviously a big miss, and a big miss for the players. So what kind of impact do you think that has on the teams, and do you think it has a big impact, or is it not really noticeable in Scottish football where crowds aren't selling out the grounds every game, and there's not necessarily 90-minute long bursts of atmosphere throughout the stadium.
Well, I agree with you what you say there. Of course, Scotland and Scotland games, apart from, of course, the big teams, like your Edinburgh teams, your Glasgow teams, and perhaps Aberdeen in there as well. They are probably the ones that feel it more because you can see it. Before COVID, when Celtic were allowed fans in 9 in a row, uncontested, complete domination of the league. But now, one full season without a single bit of backing from their fans, and it's kind of all slipping away slightly from them. But then again, on the other hand, what's Rangers doing? Because they're doing their best season ever without their fans. But I think for the lower teams, such as ourselves, it's definitely had an impact. Perhaps not a huge impact, but it's nice. I'm speaking from what I'd imagine. If you're playing all right as a player down on that pitch and you're hearing the fans, having a good time, singing songs about you, cheering when you score, it boosts you, makes you want to go do it again. But just now, sit on a 1-0 lead and then eventually, if you're come on, get overcame by opposition attackers and then throw away the lead. But I think that's kind of the main difference without fans, probably the defensive aspects of it.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think generally we here at Rugby Park don't feel it as much as the likes of the big teams like Celtic and Rangers and Hibs and Hearts, because we're not used to having full stadiums with lots of atmosphere. Obviously, it could be important and it could be a miss in key moments, such as late in games when you're maybe holding on to a lead or you're looking to go forward and get a goal, and the fans can really help with that, whether it's backing you or whatnot, and spurring the team on in that regard. But generally, I don't think it's made a massive difference. I think it is more noticeable in stadiums and with teams that have a bigger following, more atmosphere. I think when the league down in England first restarted after the summer last year, I think it was really noticeable there because they're obviously used to big stadiums and full crowds, and you could see in large parts of those games there was big lulls, there was big periods where not a lot would happen, and you felt like you needed the crowd there to sort of get the players going again and get the game going. Whereas here, with the exception, as we say, of the big teams, I don't think that's really been an issue. Even when you look at the big teams in Scotland, you could say that it's maybe had an impact at Celtic for sure, them not having the backing of their fans and the Green Brigade in particular, who always create a pretty good atmosphere at Celtic Park. But you could also say the same about Rangers, because I know that obviously they must get a lot of support from their fans, especially at home and away as well. But with Rangers, I think it's slightly different because they're when they play at Ibrox, I think it's well known that if they're perhaps not playing well, or they've not scored in the first half, then the atmosphere can become quite toxic very quickly. And so that's maybe actually helped them this year rather than hindered them, because they don't have that sort of pressure and they're able to sort of relax a bit more when maybe they haven't been playing too well in the first half of a game, but in the second half then they know they don't really have any pressure to go forward immediately and try and get a goal as quickly as possible. They can sort of edge it out and try and win the game, in the later stages. From a corner point of view, obviously, we would love to have the fans here, and it would be great to get everyone back. But from a footballing point of view, I don't think it's made too big a difference. I don't think this season we would have played any better, or the performances would have been better if we had fans here. I think it would actually have been worse, because obviously probably at the end of most games at Rugby Park this year, the fans would be booing, and that would play on the players' minds. Obviously, they read all this stuff on social media, or they probably do. But I actually think it's maybe helped the Kilmarnock players a bit this year, because they have been pretty bad generally, and I don't think they've had the same sort of scrutiny that perhaps they would normally have if the fans were in.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a bit of a safe haven for them to recover their egos and They're just morale in general. Just looking down at that Kilmarnock team tonight, they're I wouldn't say completely transformed, but they look like they're on the recovery. They're getting forward. We were talking about it instead of just weird sidewards passing. There's still a few examples of that here and there, but sometimes it's required to go forward. You have to go left, right, or back a few times, but. Just with the crosses into the box, utilising that Kabamba is massive and putting in some good balls from the fullbacks. It's a different kind of vibe going around down on the pitch so far. Whether Kilmarnock concede one or two and it gets absolutely punched back out of them again is a thing to see. But on the point of the fans, as you were mentioning, with the big teams, I think we look at some of the games that Celtic have had in particular. When they got bet by St Mirren at home on an occasion. I think that's where the fans would really come into effect, because see with the smaller teams, see when you've got like thousands of fans just like singing songs in support of the opposition, and you're in the opposition's ground as well. I think that's just so intimidating and would really put them off their play. Whereas they've got a completely empty stadium. It's essentially a neutral venue, despite a couple of like banners and the colour schemes of the stadium and such. But I think that's where a big effect comes into it. Like the smaller teams going to the bigger teams' stadiums because they're not as intimidated by the fans or worried perhaps or something like that. I'm not really sure what would play on their minds, but in my head, that would put me off a lot more if I was a smaller team visiting.
You say that, but there's also the opposite aspect of that is that Rangers, never mind at home, but just generally still haven't lost a game in the league this season yet. So it's even more testament to them when you're saying that perhaps these grounds are a bit more neutral because there is no fans. But Rangers are still managing to win every single home game that they've got. Granted, they're winning the away games as well, but it obviously comes down to the quality of the teams as well. But I'm certain that the fans not being there certainly do, play a part. But hopefully, looking forward, we can maybe get fans in. Probably not at the end of this season. Let's be honest, but maybe towards the start of next season as well. And how big a difference do you think that will make to the team? Just having the fans back, maybe it'll just bring. It's maybe a bit doom and gloom around the club, and part of that might be because the fans haven't been able to get into the stadium as well. There's always that sort of negativity and just a sort of sadness that the fans haven't been there. But maybe, once the fans are back and they can get back into the stadium and, have their bovrils and their pies and see their team play, it might just lift the mood around the club generally as well.
Yeah, well, you've got to look back, see from the games that we've commentated on in particular, big moments, especially against the Old Firm teams when they came to visit, the big moments, last season when we bet Rangers 2-1 or just there when we got into Europe 2-1, the crowd was, really
they played a big part of that day. There's no
it's on the big occasions for the smaller teams the crowd definitely comes into effect. But if there was a crowd in here for the 4-0 Celtic game, I don't know. I think it would definitely have been a much worse impact for the players. And as you were saying, it's not been the best season for Kilmarnock at all so far. So I feel like it would be better if Tommy Wright comes in now towards the end of the season, gets a little bit of normality back, a few wins under his belt, maybe a draw or two. But build a positive atmosphere back up. Then hopefully, as you're saying, we get the fans back in towards the start of the next season, and then it builds everything back up nicely. But I think if we were to have fans in this season so far, how things have went, first of all, I don't think we've had many fans in the stadium. But secondly, I don't think they've been particularly happy, or they would have helped the team morale very much.
Yeah, it certainly swings both ways, but I think one thing we have to say is that we're dying to get the fans back, and really the sooner they're back, the better.
Yeah, it's definitely fun for us when we're here. You get to see the people's reaction, and it builds nicely to the atmosphere, I'd say, for us commentating. Perhaps not when you've got someone who's had a bevy or two in your ear talking to you, but when you've got crowds screaming and singing around you, happiness, it makes it a much more enjoyable atmosphere to be in, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.